Welcome again, everyone. So thanks again for joining us for our session today on diabetes and infection, all part of the series that we're doing on World Diabetes Education Awareness Month of November and World Diabetes Day on November 14th. So we're definitely looking forward to having all of you learn more and understand more what all this is about and how you can be supported in this whole journey. So today we're going to talk about diabetes and infection. And you may or may not know, depending on where you're at on the diabetes journey, or if you're here for family or friends, about the dangers of infection with diabetes. But they're very serious, and they're very preventable. So it's definitely why we're here. We're here to give you good news. We're here to let you know what to be on the lookout for and how to really have an early warning sign for anything that is happening. And precisely we're talking about, how you can have infections that you don't even notice, why it kind of gets into this downward spiral and things go bad really quickly, and how you can improve that, make sure that doesn't happen to you. The lab markers, we've been talking a lot about labs in this whole series, and it's because some very simple labs can give you some very good indication on what's happening, and there's no reason why not to do these really simple labs to get clarity. And we can talk about, how can this all be fixed and how can it be improved? And so if you don't already know me, I'm John Vargasetti, Director of Hero Diabetes Programs, co-founder of E4 Diabetes Solutions, and happy to be with you and sharing all the information we have for your information and knowledge. But as usual, this is for informational purposes only. Do not start or stop any medications without consulting with your doctor. And as I said, post your questions in the Q&A box. There's a little Q&A, a little icon at the bottom of your screen, or if on your mobile, just tap on the screen and it'll show up. And so before we start, let me just take a few minutes to talk about E4 Diabetes Solutions, our journey, and why we're here to support you. And so E4, we are a social impact organization really focused on a big vision for the world, a world without diabetes, a world where there's no chronic diseases. And of course, that's a vision which may take a long time to achieve, but we all work towards that, and that's part of the goal, is working towards that, and something you can do yourself also, taking a step towards that. And it's based on the principles of health, ethics, spirituality, and sustainability. And that's a little bit unique about how we approach things. Many people focus just on health, but they ignore the rest, or they focus just on sustainability and they ignore the rest, or just on animals or care for the environment. And so it really is best when you bring it all together, and it's like the 4-win, the 4X win for everyone, for yourself, for the environment, for others, and for connecting with something greater than yourself. And so as we've been inviting people to do in these sessions, if this is your second, third, or fourth session with us, or if it's your first, the same question applies, which is we invite you to really think about what it is you want to do with your life. So just look at the journey of, where you've been, what you've been doing, and what it is that you want to still do. What are the things that you have on that list of wish list that you want to do with your life, you want to do ahead of time, but you haven't maybe made the time, you haven't had the health, and that's why we're here to support you on that piece of the journey. And even if you can't do them right now, having the vision of what you want to do and having that something is in the future can really motivate you to do the changes that sometimes may not be easy, to live this lifestyle that's going to allow you to do that. So it's really something important, because many times we've heard from people, I just want to enjoy life now, and I don't want to, have to go through any sacrifices now. But as we all know, sometimes we go through small sacrifices today to get greater and greater benefits tomorrow. And that's what we want to really invite you to think about, is, what are the trade-offs, and what would you want to do in the future, so you can think about a reason to go ahead and do that. And within the E4 family, E4 Diabetes Solutions focuses on reversing and reducing diabetes, preventing prediabetes, making sure you never get there if you're early enough, and if you're already there, to reduce it as much as possible. And what we've found is that everyone is different. It's not just a simple diet plan for everyone that works. It's not just enough to read the books. Everyone needs to be looked at individually and really focused on how we can support you individually. And we have, decades and decades of experience in our team treating diabetes, and we've had success after success. So we know the process that works, and we're here to support you on that journey. And since the beginning, you might have seen a lot of different apps on the web, and download this and download that to help monitor your diabetes, or monitor food or journaling. And they are definitely useful, but they're not enough. It's like necessary but not sufficient. And the same thing with one-on-one coaching and one-on-one counseling. They're very useful, but if you don't have the data and you don't have the technology to understand what's happening, then it's not as effective. So from the beginning, our vision was to combine the best of technology and the best of personalized care to really achieve the optimal outcome and the optimum solution. And we have a really large team focusing on supporting you on this journey, and experts of all kinds in diabetes and in diet and in lifestyle to really help you on this journey. So let's dive deeper into today's topic of diabetes and infection. And so the dangers of infections with diabetes. Let's review just some general research on this. And I could pull up 1,000 articles, but just this is a general review done by the Journal of Gerontology, and it's a fairly comprehensive review of all the other articles and studies around this topic. And it kind of looks at the relationship between diabetes and early death, and what causes what, and why is it that it's such a challenge, and such something that's been a problem for so many people. And so this one of the studies that they looked at was they looked at 800,000 people who had died with diabetes, and they were trying to figure out what was beyond just having diabetes the triggering cause. And they essentially reported on average, and this is something we've talked about before, for people that have diabetes, there's at least a 6-year life reduction. And that's why we want you to get rid of it, minimize the complications, because that doesn't have to be your case. You can definitely lead a full, healthy, joyous life to 100 and beyond, even if you have had diabetes, and even if you currently have it. And it's something that there's patients that Dr. Yamberg sees that 106 years old was one of his most recent patients, and still doing well. So it is absolutely possible to reduce and reverse diabetes. So don't let this scare you. It's just the general statistics, but you don't want to be part of that general population. But what's interesting is just relating how it ties to infectious diseases. And so it was reported in this analysis that the hazard ratio for someone with diabetes dying from infections was 2.39, which means 239% increased risk, compared to for even something like as serious as pneumonia. So people with that got pneumonia and didn't have diabetes, had a 167% greater risk. And then for people with diabetes, any kind of infection caused a 239% risk. So why does this happen, that you have infections being a really a serious risk factor? So there's two different scenarios, and we'll talk about them kind of in order. One is the hidden infections, which you may not even know you have. And this is very, very common. There's many times where we have an infection, but we don't really realize why it's there. And so just to choose one, for example, the periodontist, it's something where there's a hidden chronic infection, and there's it's something where it's pretty much painless. In other words, you can have teeth, any kind of tooth, and periodontist is just one kind of infection in the gums, but you can have a hidden root canal. You can have even slight toothaches that feel like it's just something small, but it's really something that's more serious. behind the scenes, you can have sinusitis that, feels like just something small, but can be really a chronic infection. And even talking about one of the biggest challenges with people with diabetes is around infections, for example, in the feet, that can really be a downward spiral. And so I'm going to tie it together to this whole idea of having low-grade infections in a minute. But so there's essentially the low-grade infections you don't even know you have, and then there's the serious infections, which are what causes the real serious downward spirals. And so, the amount of, it's just so sad, the amount of amputations that happen. And it's just completely unnecessary. None of these really need to happen because of diabetes. It's completely 100% preventable. And that's why we're here. We're here to have it be where there's a world where this doesn't happen. And so why does it happen though? And you would think, it would never happen to me. And hopefully for all of you listening, it hasn't happened yet. And the goal is for it to never happen. And so why does it happen? And what's really surprising, because we had we've had many participants that have been on the edge, and we've had some participants that have actually had some of this happen already before they joined the program. And one of the participants had a toe amputated. And, I remember talking with him, how did that happen? And he was someone that was really not just ignoring his diabetes. He was focusing on his health. His A1C wasn't even that high. It was around 6.5. Compared to where you would normally think someone has an amputation, where their A1C is 10, 12, or 14, or really, really high. But so in his case, he was really focused on using the medicines, and he was following his doctor's guidance on diabetes. He was, watching himself. He wasn't just ignoring his health. And so I asked him, how was it that you ended up having to have this happen? And he said, it was so fast, he couldn't even believe it. It was he used to be a chef, so he was standing most of the day, and somehow there was a attack that kind of went through his shoe. And because this is kind of the problem with diabetes, that kind of is the cascade effect, is he had lost feeling in his leg and his toes and in his foot. So he had neuropathy, which is one of the challenges that can happen with high blood sugars over a long time. But this is how it all ties together. It's not just one thing and that's it. It kind of is this circle where one thing affects the other thing affects the first one, and it goes in this downward spiral. So he had neuropathy, which meant that he had lost feeling in his toes, and so he did not feel that that tack kind of go through his foot and touch and kind of get into his big toe. To make just a weird thing happen, sometimes these things happen in life. It was like one of those really busy days, so he didn't notice it. He was kind of on that tack pretty much most of the rest of the day. He went home, and for some reason he was just so tired after a long day. Normally he would check his feet, but he didn't check his feet that day. And so he went to bed. The next morning he thought everything was fine, went to work as usual. But since he was stepping and really impacting that infection, then it was getting worse and worse, and he wasn't noticing it. By the third day, he had then gone home, checked his feet, and then he saw this kind of sore. He started to put it some, like antibiotic or some, home wound, because it just looked like a small sore. And then by the fourth day, it was like really, really, really seriously looking bad. So he went to the hospital, and they said, it's too late. It has already been, the infection's already gone to the bone, and if we don't take it off, it'll kind of go up the leg, and it's better to lose a toe than the leg. So, it happened in 5 days, and so it can happen really, really quickly, and that's why it's so important to have all these other things that would have prevented that to happen first. Like if that person hadn't had neuropathy, then this wouldn't have happened. If that person had been checking the feet every day. So, if you have diabetes and you have neuropathy, it's an absolute must. If you can't feel something, you have to do the daily work of checking, and then you have to take immediate proactive action. And then this is where the low-grade infections can happen. Someone can have lower sensitivity because of maybe it's not full neuropathy yet, but the feeling isn't fully there. And then they might not feel something that's like a toothache or like something that's in like a dental issue. It can be one of the sources we see a lot of low-grade infection that happens over time. So it is so important to really make sure that you attack all these areas from all the different angles, so it never gets to that point. And then, just as a very serious warning, is don't let anything get serious. Take it very seriously the minute anything happens. Like if you get any kind of puncture wound, this is the problem with diabetes, is that essentially wounds heal much slower, right? So if you have high blood sugars, then the wound cannot heal as fast, and that's kind of one of the fundamental challenges. And so you want to make sure you absolutely take care very, very quickly of anything that you can see, and then you want to, as much as possible, not let anything be chronic. And so this is where the question of the lab markers is important when we go back to the labs. And this is it's why I keep talking about one single lab once a year at a minimum. And if you have more serious diabetes, it would be every 3 or 4 months, can make such a big difference. So it's not something that's expensive. It's not something that can really be it's not something that should be avoided. It's something that you really should look forward to, is looking at these labs and understanding where they're at, because they give you early warning sign. So we've talked a lot before about this inflammation marker, and I keep saying one single lab once a year for everyone. And if not, if you have anything that's more advanced, then one extra lab every 3 months is just incredibly important. And I'm going to keep beating this topic, because it just boggles my mind why every single doctor doesn't do this. But again, like I said, they really have their hands tied by the insurance companies. And so don't let that be you. Make sure you advocate for yourself. So we've talked before, but I'll talk again in detail about this inflammation marker. And so many people think the hsCRP or the CRP is related to just inflammation, but it's also related to infection. So it's one of these tests which it sort of serves like this check engine early warning light. So in other words, it doesn't tell you exactly what's wrong, but it tells you there is something wrong, so you then can do more advanced testing. That's essentially what happens when we have a car and we see that check engine light, right? The check engine light doesn't say your gasket's damaged, or it doesn't say your spark plugs are bad. It doesn't say what's wrong, but it gives you that little warning. Something is wrong. Go have it checked out. So this inflammation marker, this hsCRP, is that key test. And yeah, I'll show the details out in a second a little more. And so this test, in addition to the A1C, the CRP test, is the one that you want to have this early detection of inflammation. And so let me go through it in detail, because even doctors get confused by this. So the actual name of the test is the basic test, which is the simple one, and we want you to run a more advanced one. But the simple one is called CRP, and that is a measure of inflammation, but it's also, like I just talked about, a measure of infection. So whether it's an infection or inflammation, it can detect that something is not going well in the body, and then you can have that early warning sign. And so to get more specific, the CRP, there's 2 tests actually, and doctors get it wrong all the time, unfortunately. There's 2 tests. There's one called the CRP test, and the other one is called the hsCRP. And hsCRP means high sensitivity cardiac reactive protein, and it's the one that will, along with the A1C, really give you good indication as to what's your risk of heart disease, what's your risk of getting a stroke or heart attack, and how you can reduce it. And so the high sensitivity reactive protein can be much more sensitive in detecting something early on that can be wrong than the CRP. Your CRP essentially stops at 1.0 and doesn't measure anything below that. And the hsCRP measures down to 0.1. And so if you have an hsCRP, then it could be that it's greater than 3 or 5, and that tells you, there's some kind of active infection going on. And then you would want to, do the further set of tests to find out what that is. And then if you have something between, 1 and 3, then that tells you you don't typically have an infection, but then you have some kind of, heart disease or some kind of relationship to inflammation. So it can detect between infection and inflammation by the value that you get on its test. If it's a very high value, it's typically an infection. If it's a medium to low value, it's inflammation. And if it's very low, you're good, which is where we want you to be. And so again, most doctors aren't allowed by the insurance to order that CRP tests. And of the ones we've asked to order the hsCRP, they end up ordering the CRP, and you don't get really the answers you want. But that's the test is called hsCRP, and that's why we would measure essentially the hsCRP marker to detect infection, because with that same test, essentially you can detect, whether if it's a really high value, if it's an infection, or if it's a low value, you can detect that inflammation. And so just as a comparison, typically on a yearly physical, your doctor would order a A1C. If you are at any risk of diabetes, they'll order a lipid panel, which is all the cholesterol numbers. They'll order something for the liver, and they'll order typically a very basic kidney check. And so they don't by default order the inflammation marker, and they might not even order the A1C if you don't already have diabetes or you're not already in that prediabetes range. Typically, the standard of care is to first at the standard yearly check-in. If you aren't already, in the diabetes or prediabetes range, they will typically just order a fasting glucose test, and then if that's high, then they'll order the A1C. But that's definitely not enough. We've talked about that other times. You definitely want the A1C, and in addition, you also want that hsCRP. So here on the graph, you can see more in detail the specific different tests in range of how advanced they are and what you would want to order. So typically, like I said, a doctor would order the A1C if you have, already risk of high blood sugar. But if not, you definitely want to have the A1C. And then additionally, the test that you want to get is this hsCRP, the test for inflammation and infection. And so if you compare kind of what we're calling this essential monitoring package, and again, whether you get it from us or whether you get it, you kind of arm twist your doctor to give it to you, or you get it some other way. This essential monitoring package, that list of tests, is the absolute minimum we would recommend everyone get every year. And if you have any kind of high blood sugar, we would recommend you get it every 3 or 4 months, just like someone with diabetes would typically get an A1C every 3 or 4 months. If you have any kind of risk that shows up on your yearly test, then you would want to repeat those essentially every 3 or 4 months to make sure what's happening. So the tests that would be included and are recommended to be included is that hsCRP test. And you need to put that HS in front of it. If you just say CRP or inflammation marker, the doctors won't order the right one. So hsCRP is the specific name for that test that you want to make sure that checks for inflammation and infection. And then you want to make sure you get the A1C and making sure that they're actually checking the consequences of the A1C and give you that information. The lipid panel, that's pretty standard. Most doctors will do that anyway, but we've seen some doctors that only do it every other year, or sometimes they do it every year. But but when they do your 3-month check, they don't do that. It's like that's also very not appropriate, because things could change a lot with with your lipids or your cholesterol or your triglycerides. It can change within weeks. So there's no reason why not to check that every 3 or 4 months if if it's already a high risk. And then we talked about this before in one of their presentations, and if you missed it, we're going to have a special series of replays where you can catch up with them. And the kidney disease, we had a whole series on the kidney disease, but you want to make sure you also have the GFR properly checked, because many times doctors don't fully check the GFR. So these tests in this essential monitoring package are the ones that, at a minimum, everyone should get every single year. If you have anything that shows up as a concern in that yearly test, then you would want to repeat it every 3 or 4 months to see how it's progressing and see how things are improving. And then from the set of tests that we offer, so that to make it easy for you, because we know it's so hard with getting what you want from your doctor sometimes. So what we call the core monitoring package then includes the insulin resistance at fasting. And we'll have a special session on this upcoming, where we talk about this more in detail. But the 2-minute summary is that high insulin is bad, as well as low insulin. Like everything in the body, you want that happy medium. And so by checking your insulin levels at the same time you're checking these other tests, you can detect how you are in terms of your insulin resistance, at least at fasting. And that'll give you, if you haven't done any of these tests before, that's like the first step, at least see when you're fasting in a quick 30-minute test, what's going on. And then again, for people that don't want to be at the lab a long time, we created this complete monitoring package where you only go to the lab again for about 30 minutes to do the fasting tests, and then at home you can do essentially a glucose tolerance test that will guide you through and analyze, and then we'll pull the two together, and then you can have a one-on-one meeting with a doctor to review that, and that's what we call the complete monitoring package. And for people who already have diabetes or are more advanced in their risk scenarios, then the comprehensive monitoring package is the one where you go to the lab for 4 hours, do the full 4-hour glucose tolerance test that we recommend, and then you really see what's happening with your insulin resistance, not just at fasting, but every hour on the hour for 4 hours. And that is the most comprehensive, best test to really understand in terms of diabetes risk and in terms of insulin resistance, pre-diabetes risk of progressing. It tells you where your pancreas is at in terms of your health status. So if you're able to do that test, we still recommend that for everyone. But again, at a minimum, this essential monitoring package, which is that inflammation test we talked about today. So it is really very, very affordable and very simple to add that one test in addition to what your doctor would typically do. So I'll repeat it again. One test once a year at a minimum gives you a ton of information that really would make sure you do well. And this is why it's important to do regular measurements, because this can change within 3 months, within 4 months. Inflammation can change very quickly. Insulin resistance can change. Your kidney can change. So essentially the sequence we would recommend, essentially once a year, do a big test with a lot of different analysis, see where you're at, and the ones that aren't in good range, the ones that are concerning, the ones that are at a risk, then you repeat those more frequently. And it sort of follows the practice of the yearly physical, except our recommendation would be for the yearly physical to be truly a comprehensive physical and not just a very small picture of what's going on in your body. And so if you want to sort of get a picture of what we look at internally when we guide you, and this is kind of why we say everyone's individual. We invite you to have us give you guidance. We're happy to, at no cost, look at your prior labs. I'll have a meeting with you, and we can review what you've done before, what your situation is, and recommend which labs are appropriate for you and at what frequency and at what case. So this is just an example of how one of the formulas we look at internally to give you the recommendations. Like I said, it's not the same for everyone. Everyone is unique. So if you're someone that has, for example, an A1C above 9, but you're not yet on insulin and your insulin resistance is high, then some of these tests really are not applicable. You would need more advanced than that core monitoring package, because once you get your A1C above 8 or 9, you need that glucose tolerance test to really know what's happening. And then you would want to do that if it's in serious condition every 3 months. And if you have your A1C above 9 and you're on insulin, then it's even more complicated. You definitely want to do even more testing more frequently. On the other hand, if you aren't there yet, which is great, and you don't want to get there, which is what we want you to have happen, never get to diabetes if you don't already have it. And if you have it, it's not too late, but the earlier you start, the better. So let's say you're in good shape, your A1C is below 5.3, you have low insulin resistance, then pretty much, every 6 months or every year, you can have the more comprehensive panels. And then for the ones that are out of range, those are the ones we would recommend to check more frequently. So we'll walk you through all this, and we'll help understand your situation, and we'll help guide you through the process. And so the question of, can infections be healed is one of the key questions. And the good news is that yes, in many ways. So first of all, if you know you have an infection, it can be treated. And as much as we love using natural methods as much as possible, and as much as antibiotics are overused and many times treated for viral infections, which have no bearing because antibiotics do nothing for a virus, they do and are appropriate when you have some kind of infection, and it needs to be treated very quickly. You might need a topical antibiotic, might be the first if it's something that's actually a physical wound. If it's something that is, for example, dental work, well, it doesn't help to take an antibiotic if you still have the actual problem, right? If you have a root canal, if you have an infected tooth and you just put some antibiotic over it, but it actually needs a root canal, or it needs to be replaced, or it needs to be fixed at the root level, then patching it up isn't going to solve it. You need to solve the root problem. And so, but knowing that it's even there can be part of what the lab test helps you understand if you don't already have any feeling, or you don't already have any sense that it's there. So it's absolutely important to know that it's there, so then you can take standard medical treatment, and they can be improved by reducing your A1C and reducing your blood glucose. So that it works in both ways. If you already have an infection, get it treated right away. And if you don't know you have it, then you can find out you have it and get it treated right away. And in parallel, or in conjunction, or at the same time, you can focus on lowering your blood glucose, which then helps you reduce the probability of the infection getting worse quickly. So in other words, let your body do the healing by having your body in good shape. And so the challenge is if your A1C is above 6 or above 7, the progression of infection can be very, very fast compared to someone who has an A1C of 5. And so that's why we want everyone to get to the point where their A1C is in great shape, because then your body is able to do its normal healing. Infections don't progress as frequently, and your body can pretty much heal itself very quickly of anything that happens. So it can also prevent, if you catch it early enough and you essentially lower your blood glucose and lower your A1C before it gets to neuropathy, for example, then it's something that doesn't need to ever happen. And once neuropathy happens, it's actually one of the things that is very hard to reduce. It has happened. It can happen in some cases, but what you want to do is prevent it, so it never gets there. That's part of the goal. And so by reversing diabetes, by reversing infections, by lowering your blood glucose, then it can reduce your opportunity to get any infections or anything to get it into really serious shape. So we've talked about this before, but it's important to really review again, which is that it's never too late to do these changes. And we've talked before about how you can reduce diabetes, and even when you can't fully reverse diabetes, you can dramatically reduce your A1C, which essentially lowers your risk of infections getting worse. It lowers your risk of something that wouldn't normally be an infection turning into an infection. And it really is something that can be done very, very tractably. In other words, it can happen very commonly with a comprehensive lifestyle approach, is to really, get your A1C below 7, which is priority number 1, and then get it even closer to 6, below 6 or below 5 is part of what we want you to focus on. So when you lower your A1C, this is kind of what I was measuring. It also lowers infection. So we've talked about how essentially lowering A1C lowers everything, right? Whether it's infection, whether it's whether it's infections, or whether it's heart attack, whether it's kidney disease, whether it's inflammation. A1C is one of the key markers that really is a measure of success in all of these areas, which is why focusing on improving your blood sugar, improving your situation with diabetes, if you have it or if you don't have it, not even getting there, is part of what happens. So yeah, it lowers anything. Pretty much all the major risk factors that happen with diabetes, it lowers. And specifically today, talking about infection, if you have your A1C above 7, that's where it really, really quickly, something very minor can turn, within days or weeks, into something that, if you don't treat it, if you don't know it's there, can turn into that case of amputations. We never want that to happen to anyone. So make sure you get your A1C below 7, and the way you do it does matter, because there's many medicines that can help get the A1C below 7, but they don't really fix the underlying cause. So the other factors of diabetes are still present. That doesn't mean there isn't a benefit to using medication if that's what you've been doing up to now to lowering your A1C, because even if you use the medicines, we're not against medicines, we're against inappropriate use of medicines. We want you to not need them as much as other people need them. So in other words, if you're not doing anything else other than taking the medicines is better than doing nothing, right? Because it still helps reduce the A1C. And if you can get your A1C below 7 by medicines, it won't help reduce the insulin resistance. It won't help, with the long-term progression of diabetes, but it will help what we're talking about today, which is infections. So it will help reduce the probability that infection, if it does happen, will turn into something like an amputation. So medicines are appropriate in certain cases, and especially if you're not yet doing something like we're proposing with lifestyle, they're definitely appropriate. But even better than taking the medicine is doing the lifestyle change, which really fixes the underlying causes and makes sure that you don't need the medicines, or if you need some, you need much less of it, and you can get your A1C much down lower. So typically medicines, like all the standard diabetes medicines, they will typically lower someone's blood sugar just below 7, and that's where doctors stop worrying, which is unfortunate. But while it's good to get your A1C below 7, the lower, the better. So our goal for everyone is to try and work towards optimum. And not everyone can get towards optimum, but the journey of trying to get towards optimum is better than not trying, because by trying and by adjusting your lifestyle to try and get towards optimum, the kinds of changes you do in your lifestyle make sure that you've kind of reduced your risk of almost all the other diseases. So between that 5.4 and 6.9, the major risk is really a heart disease risk increase, and then above 7 is where all these other risks start to cascade. So priority number 1 is get your A1C below 7, and for anyone that's joined our program, pretty much 8 to 9 out of 10 people have lowered it below 7 within 8 months. And after 8 months, if they've continued to work on the program, we're pretty much, almost 100% have gotten everyone below 7 if they're, if they continue working on the program continuously with us. So if you do the work that we talk about, and we'll talk about that more in detail in some other sessions, we can definitely help you achieve that goal of getting the A1C low and getting it in a healthy way. And so, as an example, we've talked about some of these in some other sessions, but if this is your first time listening to us, an example of someone who came from A1C of 9.1 to 5.3. So it just shows it is absolutely possible. And her case was actually a more complicated case, because when we did the glucose tolerance test, it turned out that her pancreas was producing a very limited amount of insulin. And so that's one of the reasons why her blood sugars were in the 400s, 300s, 400s pretty regularly. And so she is one of the people who would have been at a really high risk of some kind of infection turning really serious if she had, had something like that happen on her foot, or some kind of injury. So the good news is she did the program very, very meticulously, and it goes to show that if someone really puts all the different strategies in place, they can reduce their A1C really dramatically, really quickly. So from 9.1 to 5.3 in 8 months. And then the other benefit in her case, which can happen in some cases, but not in all cases, so we're not going to promise that, but it's certainly something that we are all excited about when we achieve increased insulin production. So just to take a minute here to talk about the typical progression of diabetes, is that by the time your doctor actually says you have diabetes, which is that marker at 6.4, for most people they've already lost about half of the insulin production of their pancreas. About 50% of their beta cells that produce insulin are no longer producing insulin, and that's why it gets to the point where the A1C gets to be above that 6.4, is because the insulin that they're producing isn't enough to compensate for the food that they're eating. And so over time, if you don't change your lifestyle and you kind of do what you've been doing, little by little, the pancreas essentially loses its capacity to produce insulin. And this is, very, very widely reported by thousands of research papers, that's the traditional and typical progression of someone with diabetes. Is little by little, their pancreas stops producing insulin, and then eventually they need to go on more medicines, and eventually they need to go on insulin. And if that isn't enough to, keep the blood sugars low, then the blood sugars might still increase, and they might still end up at a very high risk. But that doesn't need to be you. There's definitely more powerful approaches than just doing the standard process of just taking medicines as the only option. And that's why we talk about, the powerful of the lifestyle approach. And so let me share just one other case in the interest of time, relating to a prediabetes case. Someone that had an A1C of came in at prediabetes. Her doctor had said, you have prediabetes at 5.7, and they threw the program, got it down to 5.4, and then part of it was losing a lot of weight that helped in the process. And the beauty is, the way we focus on it, we don't focus on weight as the objective. Many doctors say just try and do exercise and lose weight, but losing weight shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be get healthy, eat well, live well, and the weight just comes off automatically. So the goal is focus on your health, focus on living well. The weight will automatically start to come off as part of that whole process. And the reason I include this example also relating to today's topic is because in her case, it turned out that when we did that inflammation marker, which again, her doctor refused to run, but when we did that test for her, it turned out that her CRP was 20. And it's like, that is crazy high. The goal is below 1, and above 3 means that there's some kind of serious infection, right? So when it's really high, when that hsCRP marker is really high, that means it's beyond inflammation. It means there's some active infection. And she at the beginning couldn't really figure it out. It's like, well, I don't think I have an infection. So she went to the dentist. She went to her, many different doctors to try and figure out where the infection was. And it turns out she had a low-grade sinus infection, and there was some kind of problem in the nose that was causing that issue. So it took her a few months to figure out where that that low-grade infection was. But if she hadn't done the test to know that that was a problem, she would have gone years and years without even looking for it. So it doesn't mean that doing the test means you're going to be able to solve the problem right away. But just like the check engine light, it says, let's find out what's wrong. And many times you need to take it to the car dealer, and they run the engine check, and then sometimes it says there's 3 or 4 things wrong, and sometimes maybe you change 2 and it's really something else. So it can take some amount of time sometimes to fully figure something out, especially when you don't really know what's happening. If that inflammation marker's really high, it indicates that there's an infection and you don't know where it is. There's some detective work to really figure it out, but at least you know that you need to put effort into figuring it out because something is happening. So that's why even if you don't have diabetes, even if you have prediabetes or haven't even gotten there, these tests are still very valuable. She got so well and so healthy that she then decided to actually join E4 as a coach, and she had done some training and coaching, and now she's one of the people who can support you on the journey. And so we can support you in so many ways. If you know you already have prediabetes or diabetes and want to jump in, you can jump in at any one of these phases. So we have kind of this circular approach to always improving. And you can start by analyzing, which is what we've been talking about in these sessions. Start by the labs, start by understanding where you're at. That's, if you don't already have labs, if you don't already know that that's where you're at in terms of a challenge, start at the labs, because that's where you can get a sense of where you're at, get the status of where you're at. And then we can support you in terms of learning and improving, making sure that you can take the next steps and make the journey of improving it. Then we do the labs again, because then you want to check to make sure you have improved and which areas you have and which areas might need some more work. And then you enjoy the areas that you have improved, and then you keep working on the journey of improving the others. So you can start, either way. You can either start with labs if you haven't done labs, if this is kind of your first time on this journey of trying to look at lifestyle and trying to look at what's wrong, or you don't even know if you want to do any lifestyles. Like, no, maybe I think I'm fine. Well, do the labs, and then if things are fine, then great. Then you don't need to do any work, and then you're good. Or if the labs show that there's some problem, then we can have conversations on how to address them. If you already know that you have diabetes, if you already know that there's inflammation, infections, if you already know that that you have a challenge, you can jump right into our combined program and analysis altogether, and we can do a full package to support you on the journey. So whether it's analysis and learning, whether it's implementing or validating, you can start either way on the journey. And we invite you to take that next step and join us on that journey. That's why we're here educating you to what you can do on your own, and we definitely want you to do as much as you can on your own. We want to empower you. We're not going to solve the problems for you. We're here as your guide, as your support, part of your support team. The way we like to think of it is you're the chairperson of your own health. And in today's world with the health system, you need to be an advocate for your own health. You can't expect the doctors, you can't expect the hospitals, you can't expect the health insurance, you can't expect anyone else to advocate for you. You need to be your own advocate for yourself and make sure that you're knowing what should be done. And it's kind of crazy that you should know kind of what needs to be done, even sometimes more than the doctors. But in today's environment, most doctors have 5-10 minutes, and they can only look at a very small piece of what's happening. And they'll look at the standard labs, and then they'll make a judgment based on what they're looking at. If they knew everything else that was going on, then they would give you some other advice. But right now, given the current way the insurance companies run things, they're not allowed to really spend a lot of time. So that's why we're here to support you. If you get some of our more advanced lab packages, you can spend a whole hour with one of our medical doctors to review things with you and really help you understand what's going on. And so we have just a complete set of choices to support you on the journey. And let me just put the link in the chat. From this link, you can take a look at all our solutions, everything from the labs we have to the programs to the packages that include the labs, include the programs. And as part of November being World Diabetes Awareness Month, as part of the early Black Friday, we have a 20% discount to support you on that journey for anyone who wants to jump in right now and take advantage of that. And so it's really very affordable. We've talked about the essential monitoring package being the absolute minimum that everyone should do a year. And, $197 is very, very affordable to do at least once a year. And if you can get your doctor to do it, again, we're all for that. But I just want to give you advance warning. We've worked with, many, many, many people. They keep trying to get their doctors to do it. And sometimes, maybe 1 out of 10, they succeed. And of that time when they succeed, it still takes them at least 2 or 3 months. It's unbelievable that it would take 2 or 3 months. But what has to happen is you need to first get an appointment with your doctor to present the request to them, like, please, I want you to do these tests. They won't typically even listen to you unless you set an appointment. So you have to find a time to set an appointment, at least a virtual appointment, have a meeting with them, show them the lab tests. And we're happy to give you the list of lab tests. If anyone, wants more details on what we've been sharing here in the presentation and wants an actual list of the lab codes, we are happy to have you give you free access to some of the educational courses in our E4 Academy, and we have the list of labs there for you to give your doctor. But the process would be you would need to meet with your doctor, give them that list of labs, say, hey, look, I want you to run these lab tests. Then if the doctor agrees, then they'll, write the order, and then you'll, go sometime later to the lab. And then the next time you would meet with your doctor, probably a month or two later, to review the lab. So it has never taken less than a month, and sometimes 3, sometimes even a year. We've had a person who insists that they're going to do it with a doctor, and 2 years later, they still haven't done all the lab tests. So, you can choose what battle you want to fight. And I understand, if I was paying the money to insurance companies that we're all paying and not getting the service that we want, I would be just as upset. And it's like, hey, I'm gonna make sure I get my money's worth. But you can choose to fight that battle and get some extra stress with it, or you can choose to make your life easy, and we can help you on that journey. So we honor your choice. We'll give you all the information you need to get it done yourself, and we're also happy to make it easy for you and do it and help you get it done really simply. Like we can get these lab tests done within a week. You can be meeting with a lifestyle doctor within 2 weeks and get a review. So we can have things happen really, really fast for you. We can make life easy for you. So if you want us to help make your life easy, then join us on getting some of these tests, at least at the start. And then as far as programs, we have a wide range of programs. All the way from very affordable monthly group programs where you get to work with people every week, once or twice a week, in terms of learning what's happening and guiding you in terms of the goals. We run very small groups, so you always get a chance to get your questions answered. And it's not like these huge big groups that some people run with hundreds of people. All our groups are very small, and they allow you to do that. And then if you want more comprehensive one-on-one support, we also have programs that give you advanced support. So it all goes as to whatever makes sense for you. And we also have a lot of free education, right? So we're giving these free webinars. We have our about 20 different expert interviews that we have available at no cost. If you want to have just learning some recipes, you can just join us for one session with no long-term commitment. So we have pretty much the widest range of options that I know of in terms of supporting you, all the way from a ton of free information, education, which is what we're doing here. We want you to learn, and we want you to do as much as you can on your own. And we're here to support you in any way that makes sense to you, either in a small piece or in a large piece, whatever works for you. And so, any questions that anyone has? I think there's a question on the specific name of the test. I think I reviewed that fairly detailed on that, but I can certainly, if it's still not clear what lab test to run, like I said, you just ask the doctor for that specific set of tests, HS-CRP, and if you aren't quite clear on it still, just send us an email, and we'll give you a link to where you can download that list of labs that we're talking about. So that way, you can show it to your doctor, and you can try and get it covered by your insurance if they can manage to do that. And then if you want us to do them, then we're happy to do that, and we can do that pretty much anywhere in the US. So we work with both the two major lab companies in the US, LabCorp and Quest. We work with both of them. So whichever one is closest to you, you can go to that lab test center and have it done, and we'll coordinate all that whole process for you. And I mentioned before, again, for the specific lab tests, and again, if you need more information on this, just send us an email, and we'll give you access to that download, which I mentioned, where you can show your doctor the list of lab tests, and you can take a look at them here. This is kind of the essential test that we recommend everyone have: that inflammation marker, the A1C, and then the advanced lipid panel and kidney tests. And then, if you have a more advanced condition, or you want to understand more where you're at, then you could definitely benefit from having these more advanced packages. And if you are interested in even more knowledge of your body, beyond just insulin resistance and diabetes, for example, we have some people that really are worried about their the brain health, and a lot of articles recently on how to prevent and improve Alzheimer's and dementia. That's absolutely part of the whole package of support that we could provide if someone wants. Dr. Yemberg works a lot with people who have dementia and Alzheimer's, and has shown many cases of reversal. People who have not fully been able to function in their life, going back to being able to fully function. And so if that's one of your concerns, if it's more than just diabetes, if it's your full body health, we have these tests called Complete Full Body, which really look at pretty much every single organ in your body and every single piece of information that can really help guide you. And in addition to kind of these essential looking at the inflammation, you would be able to look at the heart risks from many different angles. Many people think that the only risk is just looking at cholesterol, but that's just one of the risks. The other risk would be looking at the particle size. Sometimes you're going to have a high cholesterol, but a set of particles which are called the large particles, and those are not as risky as if you have maybe a lower cholesterol, but the small particles. So the particle size matters a lot. It, oxidized cholesterol, if you're concerned about the heart disease, that can be another advanced marker that many people won't check, that we can check here in this in these advanced. That's part of these advanced brain and health panels here at the bottom. And then the other thing is, for infection, talking about today's topic of infection, vitamin D is one of the most important vitamins to make sure that your body can recover from infection and really heal really quickly. and it allows it to, you can recover from a cold, you can recover from flu much faster. And even for COVID, people who had low vitamin D levels had much more serious cases than people who had high vitamin D levels. So take vitamin D if you're not already taking it. For anyone that's more on a plant-based diet, vitamin B12 is essential, but it's always useful just to know what the numbers are, so you know specifically what, how much you need to take. And that's where these vitamin panel tests can be very useful. We have definitely seen where people think they're taking a lot of vitamin D. Maybe they're out in the sun every day and they say, I don't need to really take vitamin D because I'm out in the sun all the time. But it's been surprising. Some people are out in the sun every day and they have a really, really low vitamin D level because the body isn't converting that vitamin D from the sun into internal vitamin D. Some people are taking, the typical recommendation for vitamin D is 1,000 or 2,000 a day. Pretty much 8 out of 10 people who are taking that we test are low. So most people need more than that, but don't just automatically take more just because we say so. You want to have the numbers. That's kind of why you'll see many articles saying, no, be careful of vitamin D because you can get overdosed. Well, that's only if you're not testing the labs. That's why we recommend test, and then you know where you're at. You don't have to guess. Test, don't guess. And so vitamins can be very important. If someone has adrenal and fatigue analysis, and what that means is that, let's say that you are doing great during the day, but then after eating, for example, sometimes a few hours after eating, many people like crash and they need to sit down or they need to sleep or rest. They kind of lose energy in that kind of afternoon slump. That can be because of eating patterns, or it could be because the cortisol, your cortisol produced by the adrenal gland isn't working properly. So if that's your scenario, then we have these comprehensive metabolic panels, or the comprehensive full body panels, which analyze your adrenal fatigue analysis. And the other piece that can affect heart disease and can affect also overall health is the kind of fatty acids you have in the body, like omega-3 fatty acid. You've heard, some of the research that says, take fish oil, take, vegan omega-3 supplements. And for many people, that is appropriate because their omega-3, omega-6 ratios out of balance. But if you are not sure, find out, do the test. Again, the only reason why many of the supplements are challenging for many people is because they don't know what they really should be taking. Sometimes they're taking too many that they don't need to take. Sometimes they're taking too few that they aren't taking enough because the vitamin levels aren't in balance. Relating to infection, again, today's topic, the zinc and copper can have a big impact in terms of wound healing and in terms of how your body is able to fight viruses and fight infections. So your zinc can be low, your copper can be high, the copper zinc ratio can be off, and we can check for that as part of the vitamin immune panel check here. So regardless of what you want to know about your body, your environment, in your own system, your own ecosystem, like they say, we can support you anywhere on that journey. So hopefully that answered the question about the specific lab tests and where they fit into the puzzle. Let's see other questions. So there's some questions on the cost of the tests, why they cost what they cost. And so one of the challenges is that, unfortunately, we're in this health system where the insurance companies choose essentially what they want to pay, and then they choose to pay it based on essentially the minimum required to keep someone out of the hospitals is their main goal. So they'll pay for the tests that are necessary to do that, but they're not really interested, as crazy as it may seem. And we can send you some links to some videos from some experts that worked at hospitals, and they'll explain to you why the hospitals really aren't as interested in your ideal health as you would think. They're mainly interested in optimizing the their organization's business, which includes having a lot of procedures done while you're at the hospital. And so that is all part of the whole circle of the health insurance system and the payments there. So ideally, all these tests would be covered under some ideal plan, and that would keep everyone healthy. But we don't live in that world. So you can choose to, step up to do what you know that is appropriate for your health, what would be best for you, or you can choose to just keep within the system and either go with the flow with the system. And we see where that leads most people with the increase in chronic diseases that we have today, increase in diabetes, increase in all these complications, and loss of healthy life years. It's not just about living long; it's about living healthy a long time. And that is something that is very, very decreased right now these days in terms of the amount of healthy life years that people are living. In fact, some of the research talks about how this will be one of the first times in history where our kids, the children of today, will live less than the adults because of the progression of diseases that's on the way because of the lifestyle that they're living. So this is an opportunity for you to change that for you, for your family, for your kids, your grandkids, and make sure that they're not part of that statistic. You're not part of that statistic, and you can do what you want with your life. And then, I guess to just summarize in terms of the actual approach that is needed to really get to these results. It's food is one piece, but it's only 1 out of 10 pieces. We need the diet. We need to do the movement and the exercise. We need to organize our meal timing appropriately. We need to optimize our sleep. We need to make sure we're reducing our stress. We need to be focusing on our positive internal mindset. Our minds are by default looking at the negative. We need to flip that and start to look at the positive and how we can be in a positive mindset. Your genetics can also have an impact. Toxins that could be in your environment could be an impact for inflammation, for different infections, for infections not healing well. And like I talked before about the supplements and nutrition. And then digestion, if you don't digest the nutrients, then they won't get into your body properly. So all these are pieces of the puzzle, and that's why we've created the most comprehensive program with all these pieces. There's really no other program that I know of that includes as many different components of health, all brought together along with labs and analysis. And it's we like to think of ourselves as the best of all worlds. So there's many different programs that you go to a resort, you go to a live-in center, and you go to improve your health, but typically they don't include any kind of advanced lab testing like we include, and they don't include like the technology we have for you to monitor things over time. And then what happens is you leave the you go to that lifestyle center for a week or two, or sometimes even as long as a month, and you get well during that time, but then you come out and you have to go back home, and then things go back worse. We've had many people that have gone to these centers, and then 3 months later they're back where they were, and then they come to us because they've spent the money to go to the lifestyle center, and even though they were able to improve, they weren't able to sustain the improvement, and we can help you sustain that over time. And then for many of the virtual telehealth, teleservice, virtual care programs, they many times have educational components, and they can come to your home, but most of the time they don't have all the rest of the comprehensive support that we have. It's more, either a large group program where they give you education, or if you do the teledoc or the telehealth service with your health providers, it's a one-on-one consultation within the typical standard of care medical practice model, which doesn't give you the results that you want long-term that our program can provide. So that's where we encourage you to join our program if you want to get to the health and the amount of healthy life years ahead of you as much as possible. Or if you're just starting out on your journey and you're not sure where you're at, you're not sure what's well and what's not, then just start off with some lab tests. So start off with some simple lab tests and see where you're at. And then that can get you along that journey. So with that, we have answered, I think, all the questions that I see. And we thank you for joining us on this beautiful Sunday today. And we're going to have a continued series of sessions on educational information as part of this whole World Diabetes Day and the month of November for World Diabetes Awareness. So thanks again for joining us, and stay tuned for some of the other sessions. And if you're already inspired to do something better for your life and doing something better for your health, definitely I'm inviting you to take that next step and join us on our journey of health with the E4 Diabetes Solutions programs. So thanks again for joining us, and looking forward to talking to you and seeing every one of you in the next few days.